At a small auto shop, a quiet black mechanic watched his boss charge an elderly woman $425 for a repair that cost almost nothing. When everyone else turned away, he secretly fixed her mobility scooter for free and returned it to her home that same night. But the next morning, he was fired in a fit of rage. What no one at the shop knew was that the old woman was the powerful CEO and that his single act of kindness was about to change his life forever. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The morning sun barely touched the grimy windows of Peterson's auto shop in Riverside, Pennsylvania. Jack Bennett wiped his oil-stained hands on his coveralls, finishing up the brake job on a Toyota Camry. He'd been working here for 8 years now, and every single day felt the same, watching his boss Gary Peterson rip off customers who couldn't afford to fight back. Jack was 45 years old, a black man whose hands told the story of decades of hard work. His back hurt, his knees ached, and his hands were permanently stained with grease that no amount of soap could remove. But he was good at what he did. Maybe the best mechanic in town, though Gary would never admit it. The bell above the door chimed. Jack looked up to see an elderly woman struggling to push a mobility scooter through the entrance. She was small and frail, wearing a faded floral dress that had been mended several times and a thin cardigan with worn elbows. Her glasses were so thick they made her eyes look huge. The woman was clearly having trouble seeing. "Hello?" she called out, her voice wavering. "Is anybody here? My scooter stopped working." Gary Peterson emerged from his office. He was 59 years old, balding, with a beer gut that hung over his belt. His face was already set in that familiar scowl, the one that meant he'd spotted easy money. "What's the problem?" Gary's voice was cold. The elderly woman extended a trembling hand. "Margaret Palmer, ma'am. My scooter quit on me this morning. The battery's fine but the motor won't run. I was hoping you could take a look." Gary walked around the scooter slowly, barely glancing at it. "Motor's shot, belt's worn. Probably need to replace the whole drive system. That's gonna be $425. Jack felt sick. $425. For what was probably a $30 belt and an hour of labor at most. Margaret's weathered face went pale. $400. Sir, I only get Social Security. That's more than half my monthly check. Not my problem, old lady. That's the price. Take it or leave it. I need my scooter." Margaret's voice cracked. "I can't drive anymore because of my eyes. This is how I get to my doctor appointments, how I buy groceries, how I get to church. My daughter lives in Florida. I don't have anyone here to help me." "Then you better figure out how to pay for it." Gary crossed his arms. Jack watched as Margaret pulled out a worn checkbook with shaking hands. From where he stood, Jack could see the balance, $463.18. That was everything the old woman had. Margaret ran her hand along the scooter's seat. "My husband gave me this scooter 8 years ago, before he died. He picked this blue color because he said it matched my eyes. This scooter is how I visit his grave every Sunday." "Real touching," Gary said with zero sympathy. $425, cash or check?" Jack stepped forward. "Gary, that's just a drive belt. $20 part, maybe 45 minutes of work. We don't need to charge." "Did I ask you, Bennett?" Gary spun around, eyes blazing. "I set the prices around here. You got a problem with that?" Margaret was writing the check now, her hand shaking so badly the numbers were barely legible. Jack watched her hand it to Gary, tears forming in her eyes. "Leave it here. Come back Friday to pick it up," Gary said, pocketing the check. "Friday, that's 4 days from now. I got other jobs ahead of you. Friday or nothing." Margaret nodded slowly. She pulled out a white cane from her purse, unfolded it, and started tapping her way toward the door. Jack watched through the window as the old woman made her way down the street, the cane going tap 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 on the sidewalk. The bus stop was 8 blocks away. Jack turned to Gary. $425 for a $20 belt. That woman can barely see. That scooter is her only way to get around, and you just took everything she has. Gary stepped closer, his breath smelling like stale coffee and cigarettes. "You want to work for free, open your own shop. While you're in mine, you do what I tell you. We clear?" Jack looked at his boss for a long moment. He thought about his grandfather, who taught him to fix cars in a small garage 35 years ago. Thought about the lessons that came with those Saturday afternoons covered in oil and grease. A man ain't measured by how much money he makes, Jackie. He's measured by how he treats folks when nobody's watching. Crystal clear, Jack said quietly. He went back to work, but his mind was elsewhere. By the time Gary locked up and left at 6 o'clock, Jack had made a decision. Gary's Cadillac roared out of the parking lot toward his usual Tuesday night at the bar. Jack waited 30 minutes to make sure Gary wasn't coming back. Then he unlocked the bay door with his key. The scooter sat in the corner where Gary had kicked it aside. Jack wheeled it under the lights and opened the motor cover. Just as he thought, the drive belt was worn but not broken. The real issue was a loose mounting bracket that had let the belt slip off the pulley. He'd seen this 100 times. Jack kept a personal stash of common parts in his toolbox, things he'd bought over the years with his own money for situations exactly like this. When customers came in desperate and Gary tried to rob them blind, Jack would sometimes fix things after hours and tell people to pay whatever they could afford. He grabbed a new belt from his supplies. It took him 40 minutes to replace the belt, tighten the mounting bracket, and test everything. The motor hummed perfectly. Jack didn't stop there. He cleaned the whole scooter, wiped down the handlebars, cleaned the control panel, even straightened out the duct tape on the seat. He buffed the mirrors until they shined. By 9:30 he had the scooter loaded in his truck and was driving to Margaret Palmer's address, which he'd copied from the work order. The house was a tiny cottage with peeling paint and a wooden ramp next to the front steps. The yard was overgrown, the gutters sagging, and one of the porch steps looked like it might give way at any moment. A single dim porch light was on. Jack unloaded the scooter, pushed it up the ramp, and knocked on the door. Slow footsteps inside. The door opened and Margaret stood there in a worn house dress and slippers, squinting through her thick glasses at who could be visiting so late. "Mrs. Palmer, I'm Jack Bennett from Peterson's auto shop. I brought your scooter." Margaret looked confused. "But today is Tuesday. You said Friday." "I finished it tonight, figured you needed it sooner." "How much do I owe you?" Jack shook his head. "Nothing. It's covered." "Covered? By what?" "By me, ma'am. The problem was simpler than my boss thought. Took me about 40 minutes. I had the parts already. No charge." Margaret put her hand on her chest like she was having trouble breathing. "Son, I wrote your boss a check for $425. I'll get that check back to you. It won't be cashed. You fixed my scooter for free, and you're giving me my money back." Margaret's voice broke. "Why would you do that?" Jack thought about his grandfather. About Saturday mornings in a garage that smelled like motor oil and dreams. About being the kind of man his grandfather raised him to be. "Because it's the right thing to do, Mrs. Palmer. You need your scooter to live your life. Nobody should have to give up everything they have for an hour of honest work. My grandfather taught me that if you've got a skill and you see somebody who needs help, you help them. Simple as that." Margaret started crying. Not loud sobbing, just quiet tears running down her weathered face. She grabbed Jack's hand with surprising strength. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, ma'am. Just enjoy your scooter. My husband bought me this scooter." Margaret's voice was soft and far away. "Robert, we were married 38 years. He died 2 years ago, heart attack. It was sudden. He was there 1 minute, gone the next." Margaret wiped her eyes. "He knew my eyes were going bad. Knew I'd have to stop driving sooner or later. So 8 years before he passed, he bought me this scooter. Picked out this blue color himself. Said it matched my eyes from when we first met. This scooter is how I visit his grave every Sunday. How I get to the library where we used to volunteer together. How I stay connected to the life we built." Margaret's voice cracked. "When your boss said $400, I thought I might lose this last piece of him." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "You're not losing it, Mrs. Palmer. This scooter should run good for a long time now. But if you ever have trouble, you call me directly." He pulled out a business card and wrote his cell phone number on the back. "Anytime, day or night." Margaret took the card with trembling fingers. "You're a good man, Jack Bennett. Your grandfather would be real proud of you." Jack helped Margaret test the scooter, showed her what he'd fixed, made sure everything worked right. As he was about to leave, he noticed the sagging porch step and the loose gutter hanging at a dangerous angle. "Mrs. Palmer, that porch step looks like it might give way. Would you mind if I took a quick look? Oh, I've been meaning to get that fixed, but she trailed off, and Jack understood. She couldn't afford it. I've got some tools in my truck. Won't take but 20 minutes. Over the next hour, Jack fixed the porch step, secured the loose gutter, and tightened a wobbly railing. Margaret invited him inside for water, and he couldn't help but notice the house needed work. A leaking faucet dripping into the kitchen sink, a door that didn't close right, a loose electrical outlet cover. Mrs. Palmer, I see a few things inside that need attention. Would it be all right if I came back this weekend to help out? Margaret's eyes filled with tears again. Young man, you've already done so much. I'll bring my wife and our son. We'll make an afternoon of it. My boy Marcus is 11, he needs to learn how to fix things and I need to teach him. You'd be helping me out. That Saturday, Jack returned with his wife Angela and their son Marcus. Angela was a nurse at Riverside General, strong and practical with warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. Marcus was all energy and curiosity, excited to learn from his dad. They spent the day working on Margaret's house. Jack fixed the plumbing, repaired the door, secured the electrical outlets, and patched several spots where the roof had been leaking. Angela cleaned the gutters, washed the windows, and helped Margaret organize her kitchen. Marcus helped where he could, handing tools to his father and learning the names of each one. Margaret made them lunch, simple sandwiches with what she had, and told them stories about her life with Robert. About how they'd bought this house 50 years ago when they were newlyweds, how they'd raised their daughter here, how every corner held a memory. Robert and I were poor when we started out, Margaret said, looking around the small living room. Really poor. We both worked 2 jobs just to make the mortgage, but we were happy. This house represents everything we built together. I know it's not much, but I can't imagine leaving it. Angela squeezed Margaret's hand. It's not about how much it is, it's about what it means. I understand completely. As they were leaving that evening, Margaret pressed a $20 bill into Jack's hand. Please, it's all I can offer right now. Jack gently folded her fingers back over the money. You keep that, Mrs. Palmer. You already gave us something more valuable. You taught my son about perseverance and memory and honoring the people we love. That's worth more than money. In the truck on the way home, Marcus asked, Dad, why did we help Mrs. Palmer for free? Jack looked at his son in the rearview mirror. Because she needed help and we could give it. That's reason enough. But you lost your whole day off. I didn't lose anything, son. I gained something. I got to spend time with you and your mother doing something good. I got to teach you how to fix things. And I got to help someone who needed it. That's not losing. That's winning. Angela reached over and squeezed Jack's hand. She'd been his rock for 15 years, supporting him through the hard times, celebrating the good ones, and always believing in him even when he didn't believe in himself. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. What you did for that woman, both the scooter and the house, that's who you are. Don't ever change that. Jack had no idea that Margaret Palmer was already on her phone, typing something that would change their lives forever. Wednesday morning started normal. Jack arrived at Peterson's at 6:15, made coffee, got his tools ready for the day. Gary's Cadillac pulled in at 7:42, 5 minutes later than usual. That should have been Jack's first warning. Gary came through the door like a hurricane, his face purple with rage, phone gripped in his fist. He didn't go to his office. He marched straight to Jack's bay where Jack was changing oil on a Honda and slammed the phone down on the workbench. Explain this. Jack stood up, wiping his hands. The phone screen showed a Facebook post. Even from a few feet away, Jack could read it. I want to thank Jack Bennett from Peterson's Auto Shop for his amazing kindness. After being quoted $425 for a repair, Jack fixed my mobility scooter on his own time and wouldn't take any payment. Then he came to my home with his beautiful family and spent an entire day fixing my house, things I couldn't afford to repair. In a world where elderly people are taken advantage of, Jack and his family gave me back my faith in people. God bless the Bennett family. Below the post, 96 comments, 217 likes, 43 shares. Jack met Gary's eyes. Mrs. Palmer wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Gary's voice echoed through the whole shop. The other mechanics, Tommy and Steve, came out of their bays to see what was happening. You went behind my back, stole a job I already priced, did it for free, and made me look like garbage all over Facebook. I didn't make you look like anything, Gary. I just helped someone who needed it, with my tools on my time. It was 9:30 at night. I used my own parts and my own time, and the house repairs were on my Saturday, with my own tools. You work for me. Gary was screaming now, spit flying from his mouth. Anything you touch in this shop belongs to me. You cost me $425. I saved an 81-year-old woman from choosing between her independence and eating this month. I don't give a damn. Gary's face had gone from purple to bright red. I don't care about her age, her dead husband, her bad eyes, or any other sob story. I priced that job, she agreed to pay it, and you stole from me. Jack felt something cold settle in his gut. Gary, that woman can barely see. That scooter is her only way to get around. You were charging her 20 times what the repair actually cost. So what? That's called making a profit. That's called running a business, something you clearly don't understand. I understand just fine. I understand you've been ripping people off for 8 years and I've been standing by watching it happen. But I'm done with that. Gary's eyes went narrow and mean. Oh, you're done, all right. You're fired. Get your stuff and get out of my shop. Tommy stepped forward. Gary, come on. Jack's the best mechanic we got. Shut your mouth, Tommy. This ain't your business. Gary turned back to Jack. You got 20 minutes to pack up and leave. After that I'm calling the cops and telling them you've been stealing parts. Stealing? I bought those parts with my own money. Prove it. Prove every single part you've used in 8 years was yours and not mine. You can't. That makes you a thief. Now get out. Jack looked at Gary for a long moment. He could argue, could fight, could show him the receipts he kept at home for every part he'd ever bought, every customer he'd helped. But Jack realized something: he didn't care anymore. He didn't care about Gary's threats, didn't care about this job, didn't care about any of it. All he cared about was that Margaret Palmer had her scooter back, and Robert's memory was safe. Everything else was just noise. All right, Jack said quietly. He loaded his toolbox, his personal toolbox that he'd bought with his own money, into his truck. 8 years of tools, 8 years of wrenches and sockets and equipment. It took him 30 minutes, not 20. Gary stood in the doorway the whole time, arms crossed, watching like a prison guard. Tommy and Steve helped carry the heavy stuff. Neither one said anything, but their faces said it all. They knew what Jack had done. They knew why, and they knew Gary was wrong. When the last tool was loaded, Jack got in his truck and drove away. He didn't look back at Peterson's auto shop, didn't wave goodbye, just drove, watching the place disappear in his mirror. He drove straight home. Angela was in the kitchen making lunch before her afternoon shift at the hospital. One look at his face and she knew something was wrong. What happened? I got fired. Angela set down the sandwich she was making and came to him. Because of Mrs. Palmer. Yeah. Gary saw her Facebook post, lost his mind. She wrapped her arms around him. I'm sorry, baby, I'm not. Jack realized as he said it that it was true. I should have quit years ago. I was scared. Scared we couldn't make it without that paycheck. We'll figure it out, Angela said firmly. We always do, and I'd rather struggle than watch you compromise who you are every single day. By lunchtime, Jack's phone started ringing. The first call was from a woman he'd helped 4 years ago, a single mom whose transmission he'd fixed cheap after her husband left her. She'd seen Margaret's post. Jack, what you did for that woman is what you did for me. You gave me hope when I was about to give up. Thank you. The second call was from a disabled vet, whose van Jack had repaired for free, after finding out the man was homeless. Brother, you're one of the real ones. Don't ever change. The calls kept coming. Texts, voicemails, people he'd quietly helped over the years, all of them reaching out, all of them sharing their stories, all of them thanking him for kindness he never expected to be paid back for. By 5 o'clock, Margaret's post had been shared over 400 times and had thousands of reactions. Jack sat on the couch with Angela, Marcus between them, looking at his phone, trying to make sense of what had happened. He'd lost his job, lost his income, lost 8 years of stability. Dad, are we gonna be okay? Marcus asked, worry in his young voice. Jack pulled his son close. Yeah, buddy, we're gonna be fine. better than fine, because we've got each other, and we've got our principles. That's more valuable than any job. Angela kissed the top of Jack's head. I picked up an extra shift this week. We'll make rent, and you'll find something better. I know you will. That evening, Jack's phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Mr. Bennett. This is Margaret Palmer. I need you to come to my house right away. There's something important we need to talk about. Mrs. Palmer, if this is about Gary threatening you, don't worry. It's not about that. It's about your future. Can you be here in 40 minutes? Something in Margaret's voice made Jack stop arguing. Yes, ma'am. I'm leaving now. Good. Park on the street. My driveway's going to be full. The line went dead. Jack looked at Angela. That was Mrs. Palmer. She wants me to come over right now. Want me to come with you? No, you've got your shift. I'll call you after. Jack grabbed his keys and headed out the door, confused but curious. He had no idea his life was about to change completely. Jack turned onto Margaret Street, just after 6:30, and stopped, staring in disbelief. The quiet street was lined with expensive cars, black Mercedes sedans, a bright red Porsche, a silver Lexus, a dark blue Bentley parked right in front of Margaret's small cottage. Jack's beat-up Ford pickup looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood by mistake. He parked at the end of the block and walked back, his confusion growing with every step. Through Margaret's front window, he could see people inside, maybe 15 or 20 of them, all dressed in business suits that probably cost more than Jack made in a month. What the hell was going on? Jack climbed the ramp and knocked. The door opened immediately. Margaret stood there, but she looked completely different. She changed into a simple but elegant navy dress and pearls. Her thick glasses had been replaced with a newer, better-fitting pair, and there was something in her face Jack hadn't seen before. Confidence, power, authority. Jack, thanks for coming so fast. Please, come in. Jack stepped inside and froze. The small living room had been completely transformed. A big conference table covered with laptops and papers took up most of the space. The people Jack had seen through the window, 18 of them, all turned to look at him at once. A woman in her late 40s, wearing an expensive gray suit, stepped forward. Mr. Bennett, I'm Linda Patterson, Chief Operating Officer at Palmer Medical Industries. Thank you for joining us. Palmer Medical Industries. Jack knew that name. Everyone in Pennsylvania knew that name. They were one of the biggest medical equipment companies in the country, worth billions, with factories in 7 states. I don't understand, Jack said slowly. What's Palmer Medical doing in Mrs. Palmer's living room? Margaret smiled, and it was the smile of someone revealing a secret they'd kept for a long time. Because this is my living room, Jack, and Palmer Medical is my company. The room seemed to spin. Jack stared at Margaret, at the old woman in the faded dress who'd written a check with shaking hands yesterday, who'd cried over a broken scooter, who'd walked away with tears in her eyes. Your company. I founded Palmer Medical 39 years ago with my husband Robert. We started in our garage, building custom wheelchairs for disabled veterans who couldn't afford the expensive ones. We grew slow at first, then faster than we ever dreamed. By the time I retired 12 years ago, we had 3,200 employees and factories in 7 states. Jack's mind was racing, trying to match up the helpless old woman from yesterday with the billionaire standing in front of him now. The scooter, Jack managed. Why didn't you just buy a new one? Margaret's face softened. I could have bought 1,000 new scooters. But that one was Robert's last gift to me. That exact scooter, with its faded blue paint and taped-up seat, means more to me than any amount of money. A gray-haired man in his 50s stepped forward. Mr. Bennett, I'm Richard Hayes, Chief Engineer at Palmer Medical. I've worked for this company for 24 years. Margaret called me this morning and showed me the diagnostic report from when you repaired the scooter. Diagnostic report. Richard smiled. Every mobility scooter we make has a computer inside that records all repairs and service. We build them that way for safety and quality control. Your repair was absolutely perfect. Right torque on every bolt, correct belt tension, thread locker on the mounting bracket, and you didn't try to sell her anything she didn't need. That's just doing the job right, Jack said. No, Margaret said quietly, that's doing the job with honor. There's a big difference. Margaret moved closer, her face serious now. Jack, I need to tell you something. The scooter really was broken. Robert would kill me if I'd lied about that. But I had Richard loosen that mounting bracket on purpose. I needed a real problem, something that would need actual repair work. Jack felt confused and a little angry. You broke it on purpose. Not broke created a problem that could be fixed. Jack, I've spent the last 16 months going to repair shops all over Pennsylvania. Not as Margaret Palmer, founder of Palmer Medical. Just as an old woman with bad eyes and a broken scooter. Margaret's voice got heavy. Our company pays service companies all across the country to fix our equipment. But we've been getting complaints. Overcharging, unnecessary repairs, bad service. I couldn't tell if it was just a few bad apples or if the whole system was rotten, so I decided to find out for myself. I went to 12 shops before yours. One place quoted me $1,000 for a complete motor replacement I didn't need. Another tried to sell me a brand new scooter for $2,600. One shop said it would take 5 weeks and didn't offer me anything to use while I waited, even though they knew I couldn't get around without it. Another man actually laughed when I asked if I could pay in installments. Margaret paused, anger flashing in her eyes. Every single shop saw an easy target, an old woman with thick glasses who wouldn't know if they were lying to her. Then I came to your shop. Gary Peterson was exactly what I expected after 12 other shops. Greedy, mean, looking to rob me blind. I'd seen it over and over. But you, Jack, you were different. You stood up to your boss even though it could get you in trouble. And then after I left, you did something I'd almost given up hoping people would do. You risked your job to make it right. And then you did more. You came to my home. You brought your family. You spent your entire day off fixing my house, teaching your son about service and kindness, showing me what a real family looks like. You saw an old woman in a run-down house and instead of judging you helped. Jack understood now. The test, the expensive cars full of executives, the big reveal. You were looking for someone specific. I was trying to find someone who still believes people matter more than money. Someone who understands that our equipment isn't just machines, it's people's freedom and dignity and connection to life. I'd almost given up hope. Margaret's eyes got bright. Then you fixed my scooter and showed me that person still exists. And your wife and son showed me that kindness can be a family value, passed from generation to generation. Linda Patterson stepped forward. Mr. Bennett, Palmer Medical has a serious problem. Our equipment maintenance is done by outside companies. They're expensive, unreliable, and we've found out they're ripping off both us and the patients who depend on our equipment. We've been looking for someone to build an in-house maintenance department from scratch. Richard added, we need someone with technical skills. Sure, but more than that we need someone who gets what we're really trying to do. Someone who sees patients when they look at equipment. Someone who'll build a team that cares about service, not just making money. Margaret's voice was firm. I tested you, Jack. I'm not proud of tricking you, but I needed to know what kind of person you were when you thought nobody important was watching. When there was no reward, no recognition, nothing in it for you except knowing you'd helped someone. You didn't just fix my scooter, you made it perfect. You cleaned it, you took care of it like it mattered to you, even though I was a complete stranger. And then you came to my home and spent your Saturday precious time with your family, fixing things for an old woman you barely knew. You brought your wife and son and turned service into a family activity, a teaching moment, a gift. Margaret's face softened. Robert and I built this company on one simple rule: every person deserves respect. It doesn't matter how old they are, how much money they have, or anything else. That's what you showed me. You treated me with respect when you had no reason to, no requirement to, nothing to gain from it. That's exactly what we need to build. Linda pulled out a folder from the table. Bennett Palmer Medical would like to offer you a job as Director of Equipment Maintenance. You would create and run our new maintenance division. Starting salary of $103,000 per year, full benefits, company car, and performance bonuses that could add $30,000 to $40,000 more per year. Jack's knees went weak. $103,000. He'd been making $29,000 at Peterson's. This was more than 3 times as much. There's more, Richard said. You'd have a big budget to hire and train your own team. You'd have access to our engineering department for help. And you'd have complete control over how you run your division, as long as you meet our quality standards. Linda continued, we've spent 10 months interviewing people with fancy degrees and corporate experience. None of them understood what we're trying to build. They talked about efficiency and cost savings. They saw our equipment as things on a spreadsheet, not as people's lifelines. Then you fixed Margaret's scooter, she said simply. And we realized we'd been looking in the wrong places. We don't need another corporate executive. We need someone who genuinely cares about the people we serve. That's you, Jack. Jack looked around the room at all these successful, educated people watching him. I'm just a mechanic. I barely made it through high school. I don't have a college degree, no management experience, nothing. You have something worth more than all that, Margaret interrupted. You have integrity, you have skill, and you have the ability to see people as people, not as dollar signs. You can't learn that in any school. And you have a family who shares those values. That's even rarer. Jack felt the weight of the folder in his hands. Inside were contracts, benefit papers, charts showing where he'd fit in a billion-dollar company. I'm scared I'll mess this up, that I'll let people down, that I'm not good enough for this. Margaret's smile was kind. Robert and I felt exactly the same way when Pittsburgh Children's Hospital asked us to design wheelchairs for kids 38 years ago. We were just two people in a garage who'd never worked with a hospital before. But we said yes because we cared about those kids more than we were scared of failing. We failed 9 times before we got it right, Margaret continued. But we kept trying because we believed in what we were doing. The degrees and the business knowledge, all that came later, from actually doing the work. You'll learn, Jack, we'll teach you. But the integrity you showed, that can't be taught. You already have the most important thing. Jack thought about Angela, about Marcus, about the life they'd built on modest means but rich values. I need to talk to my wife, this affects her too. Of course, Linda said, take the folder home, discuss it with your family. But I want you to know, everyone in this room has looked into your background and read testimonials from people you've helped over the years. We all agree. We want you, Jack. As Jack was leaving, Margaret walked him to the door. Jack, I want to explain something about this house. You probably wondered why a woman who owns a billion-dollar company lives in a rundown cottage. It did cross my mind, ma'am. Robert and I bought this house when we were 23 years old. We were so poor we could barely afford the mortgage. We ate rice and beans for dinner most nights, but we were happy. This house represents everything we built together, not the company, not the money, but our life, our love. Margaret looked around the small living room. After Robert died, people kept telling me to move, to buy something modern and fancy, to live like a billionaire. But I can't. Every creaky floorboard, every water stain on the ceiling, every imperfection, they're all memories of Robert, of us. This house is my connection to the man I loved for 38 years. I understand, Jack said. Some things are worth more than money. Exactly. That's why I knew you were the right person when you spent your Saturday fixing this old house instead of judging me for living in it. You saw what mattered. Jack drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, his mind spinning. When he walked in, Angela and Marcus were at the kitchen table, Marcus doing homework while Angela reviewed her nursing schedules for the next month. How'd it go? Angela asked. Jack set the folder down on the table. You're not gonna believe this. He told them everything. Margaret's real identity, the test, the job offer, the salary that would change their lives. When he finished, Angela was crying. Marcus was wide-eyed with wonder. Dad, you're gonna work for a billionaire. If I take the job, yeah. Are you gonna take it? Marcus asked. Jack looked at Angela. What do you think? Angela wiped her eyes. I think you're scared. I think you're doubting yourself. And I think that's normal. But I also know you, Jack Bennett. You're the smartest, hardest-working, most principled man I've ever met. You can do this job. You can do anything you set your mind to. But what if I fail? Then we'll figure it out, together, like we always do. Angela took his hand. Baby, you've been making $30,000 a year and supporting us just fine. If you make $100,000 and fail, we'll still be better off than we are now. But you're not gonna fail. You're gonna make that old woman proud. You're gonna build something amazing. And our son is gonna watch you do it. Jack looked at Marcus. What do you think, buddy? I think you should do it, Dad. Mrs. Palmer is really nice, and you always tell me to help people who need it. Maybe this is how you can help a lot of people." Jack pulled his wife and son into a hug. "All right, I'll do it." That night, after Marcus went to bed, Jack and Angela sat on the couch going through the contract page by page. "This is really happening," Angela said softly. "Our lives are about to change completely. Are you ready for that? Baby, I've been ready for you to get the recognition you deserve for 15 years. This is your moment. Take it." Jack called Linda Patterson the next morning. "Miss Patterson, this is Jack Bennett." "Mr. Bennett, I'm so glad to hear from you." "I have some conditions," Jack said. "I'm listening. I want to hire Tommy Rodriguez and Steve Williams from Peterson's. They're good mechanics who believe in treating customers right. They'd be good for the team." "Done. Send me their information. I want a training program for kids aging out of foster care, or people who've had trouble finding jobs. Give them skills, give them chances, give them dignity. That matters to Mrs. Palmer, and it matters to me. I love that idea. We'll work with you to set it up, and I want one day every month where we fix equipment for free for poor families. No trying to make money off it, just helping people." Linda laughed warmly. "Jack, you're asking for things that cost the company money. Most people ask for things that help themselves. If I'm gonna do this, I'm doing it the way my grandfather taught me. People first, money second. Those are my terms. Margaret is going to love you. When can you start?" "I can start Monday." "Monday it is. Welcome to Palmer Medical, Jack." After hanging up, Jack sat quietly. Angela came and sat beside him. "You did it," she said. "We did it. I couldn't do any of this without you." "Yes, you could, but I'm glad you don't have to." They sat together in the quiet of their small apartment, holding hands, knowing that everything was about to change but feeling ready for it, because they had each other, and that was all they'd ever really needed. Jack's first day at Palmer Medical was nothing like he expected. He'd imagined a corporate office, cubicles, fluorescent lights, and the soul-crushing banality of conference rooms. Instead, Linda Patterson met him in the parking lot of a massive warehouse facility on the outskirts of Pittsburgh and handed him a hard hat. "Welcome to Equipment Services," she said with a grin. "This is where the real work happens." The warehouse was enormous, at least 250,000 square feet, filled with racks and racks of broken medical equipment. Wheelchairs with missing wheels, patient lifts that didn't work, mobility scooters in pieces, machines with error messages on their screens. "This is our backlog," Richard Hayes said, appearing from behind a rack. 18 months of repairs our contractors never completed. Some of this equipment has been sitting here for over a year and a half. Jack walked through the aisles, his mechanic's eye automatically seeing what was wrong. A wheelchair with a bent frame, 30 minutes with the right tools. A scooter with a bad circuit board, replacement part, maybe an hour and a half. A patient lift with a stuck hydraulic cylinder, just needed cleaning and oil, not a whole new one. "All this stuff can be fixed," Jack said. "We know," Linda replied. "But our contractors told us we needed to buy all new equipment instead of fixing what we had. Easier money for them, terrible cost for us and our patients. That's why we need you." That first week was overwhelming. Jack had to set up an office, review budgets he didn't understand, attend meetings where people used terms he'd never heard. Every night he came home exhausted and discouraged. "I don't know if I can do this," he told Angela on Friday night. "I'm a mechanic, not a whatever these people are." Angela was folding laundry on their bed, still in her scrubs from the hospital. "Baby, you've been there 5 days, give yourself time to learn." "But I should know this stuff already. Everyone else in those meetings knows what they're talking about, and I'm just sitting there trying not to look stupid." "You're not stupid, you're learning. There's a difference." She set down a towel and came to sit beside him. "Remember when Marcus was learning to ride his bike? He fell down about 100 times. But he kept getting back on. That's what you gotta do. What if I fall too many times? Then you fall, and you get back up." "But Jack, you're not gonna fail. You know why? Because you care more about those patients than anyone else in that company. That's worth more than knowing fancy business words." Over the next month, Jack built his team slowly. He hired Tommy and Steve first, grateful to have familiar faces. Then he brought on 8 more mechanics, screening carefully for people who cared about doing right by customers. Linda also assigned him 2 administrative staff, a scheduler named Patricia and a parts coordinator named James, to help manage the growing operation. But the real nightmare started when he tried to create the foster care training program he'd promised. We need background checks, liability waivers, partnership agreements with state agencies, insurance riders, safety protocols, Linda explained, handing him a stack of documents 3 inches thick. You'll need to draft a curriculum, establish performance benchmarks, create evaluation systems. Jack stared at the papers, feeling like he was reading a foreign language. I don't know how to do any of this, he admitted. I know, Linda said gently. That's why we're meeting every morning at 7:30, I'm going to teach you. The morning sessions became Jack's lifeline. Linda walked him through business basics he'd never learned: how to read a P&L statement, how to create a hiring process, how to manage conflict between employees, how to present to executives without looking like an idiot. Every evening, Jack came home drained, but Angela was always there, listening to him talk through his problems, helping him see solutions he couldn't see on his own. You know what you should do about that vendor issue, she'd say. Call them directly and ask for a better price. Worst they can say is no. Or that employee who's always late, maybe find out what's going on in his life before you write him up. Could be something you can help with. Angela's practical wisdom, born from years of dealing with difficult situations in the hospital, became Jack's secret weapon. She could cut through corporate nonsense and see the human element that mattered. On weekends, they'd often visit Margaret. The old woman had become like family, and she delighted in hearing about Jack's progress and challenges. She'd offer advice from her own years of building the company, but more than that, she'd remind Jack why he was doing this. Every piece of equipment you fix is someone's life, she'd say. Don't ever forget that. Marcus loved visiting Margaret too. She'd tell him stories about building the company with Robert, about their struggles and triumphs, about staying true to your values even when it's hard. Your father is doing something important, she told Marcus one Saturday afternoon. He's proving that business can be done with kindness. Watch him carefully, learn from him. By month 3, Jack still felt overwhelmed, but he'd stopped feeling completely lost. The budget forecasts made more sense. He'd learned to speak the corporate language enough to hold his own in meetings. He'd established good relationships with Linda and Richard, who became his mentors and advocates, but he still made mistakes. Lots of them. He botched a budget presentation so badly that the CFO actually asked if he was serious about the job. He hired a mechanic who turned out to be stealing parts within 2 weeks. He approved a vendor contract without reading the fine print, and ended up locked into prices 20% higher than market rate. Every mistake felt like proof that he wasn't qualified for this. One night, after a particularly bad day where he'd completely mismanaged a conflict between 2 employees, Jack came home and just sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Angela came and wrapped her arms around him from behind. Bad day, the worst. I screwed up everything. Made the wrong call with those 2 guys fighting. Now one of them quit and the other one's threatening a lawsuit. What did Linda say? That I should have talked to HR before making any decisions. That I can't just handle everything myself. That there are protocols. Jack's voice was bitter. Protocols. Like I'm supposed to know all this stuff automatically. Angela came around and sat across from him. Baby, look at me. He looked up. You're learning to swim in the deep end. Of course you're gonna swallow some water, but you're still swimming. You haven't drowned. And you know why? Why? Because you care. Because you're trying. Because even when you make mistakes, you're making them for the right reasons. She took his hands. That employee who quit, would you have made the same decision again? Jack thought about it. Yeah. He was being disrespectful to Patricia. I had to step in. Then you didn't make the wrong call. You just need to learn the right process. There's a difference. Jack squeezed her hands. I don't know what I'd do without you. Lucky for you, you'll never have to find out. That weekend, Jack talked to Margaret about his struggles.
I keep making mistakes, he told her. I feel like everyone's waiting for me to fail. Margaret smiled. Let me tell you about the first year Robert and I ran this company. We made so many mistakes we should have gone bankrupt 3 times over. We overpromised to customers, underdelivered on contracts, hired the wrong people, trusted the wrong partners. How'd you survive? We learned, fast. And we cared enough about our mission that we kept going even when it was hard. That's all you need, Jack. The willingness to learn and the commitment to keep going. She paused. And you have something Robert and I didn't have in those early days. You have a partner who believes in you. Angela is your strength. Don't forget that. Jack nodded. She keeps me sane. That's what good partners do. Robert did that for me. Kept me grounded when I wanted to give up. Celebrated with me when things went right. Angela's doing the same for you. Hold on to that. By month 4, Jack was ready to quit. He sat in his small office, a converted storage room with a metal desk and a flickering fluorescent light, staring at another failed budget forecast. The numbers didn't make sense. They never made sense. His phone buzzed. Margaret Palmer. Jack, I haven't seen you in a few weeks. Mind if I stop by tomorrow? Sure, Jack said, trying to keep the defeat out of his voice. Margaret showed up the next morning in her blue scooter, moving slowly through the warehouse. She watched Jack's team work for an hour without saying anything. Then she rolled into Jack's office. You look terrible, Margaret said bluntly. I feel terrible. I'm failing, Mrs. Palmer. I can't do this job. What makes you think you're failing? I screwed up the budget analysis for Q2. I hired someone who stole from us. I can't understand half of what the finance people are saying. I'm good with my hands, but this corporate stuff, I'm drowning. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. You know what Robert used to tell me when I felt like this? He'd say, Margaret, you're measuring the wrong things. What does that mean? It means stop looking at what you can't do yet, and start looking at what you've already accomplished. How much of the backlog have you cleared? Jack checked his computer. About 40%. In 4 months. Our contractors cleared 20% in 18 months. What's your customer satisfaction rating? 92%. It was 46% before you started. How many people have you trained? We just brought in our first group of foster kids, 5 of them. Brian, Katie, Marcus, Lisa, and Devin. And how are they doing? Jack thought about it. Brian Chen was struggling with the technical side, but his work ethic was incredible. Katie Rodriguez had a natural gift for diagnostics. Marcus Williams was rough around the edges but showed real potential. Lisa Thompson was quiet but meticulous. Devin Jackson had anger issues but was slowly learning to channel it into focused work. They're actually doing pretty good, Jack admitted. You're not failing, Jack. You're learning. There's a difference. Margaret leaned forward in her scooter. I didn't know how to run a business when Robert and I started. I learned by doing it badly at first, then less badly, then eventually pretty well. That's how everyone learns. But what if I make a mistake that hurts someone? What if a patient gets bad equipment because I approved the wrong vendor or missed a quality check? Then we'll fix it. That's what systems are for. That's why you have Linda and Richard helping you. Nobody expects you to be perfect, Jack. We just expect you to care about doing it right. And you do. That's why you'll figure this out. Margaret paused. You know what the hardest part of building Palmer Medical was? It wasn't the technical stuff, or the money stuff. It was learning to believe I deserved to be in the room with people who knew more than me. Took me years to understand that caring about patients gave me a seat at that table, even when I didn't understand everything being discussed. Jack felt something shift inside him. So I just keep going. You keep going. You keep asking questions. You keep learning. And you keep remembering why you're doing this. Margaret looked out at the warehouse. Those 5 kids you're training. They're watching you figure this out. They're learning that you don't have to be perfect to try something hard. That's a lesson worth teaching. After Margaret left, Jack felt different. Still scared, still overwhelmed, but not defeated.
He called Linda. Can we add an extra session each week? I need more help with the financial stuff. Absolutely. How about Wednesday afternoons? He called Richard. I need to understand our quality control processes better. Can you walk me through them? I'll clear my schedule tomorrow. That evening, Jack came home to find Angela making dinner and Marcus doing homework at the kitchen table. It was ordinary, comfortable, home. How was your day? Angela asked. Better. Mrs. Palmer came by. Helped me see things differently. That woman's a blessing, she is. Jack hugged his wife from behind as she stirred pasta sauce. You both are. I don't think I could do this without you two keeping me grounded. Good thing you don't have to try, Angela said, leaning back into him. Marcus looked up from his math homework. Dad, can I ask you something? Sure, buddy. Are you happy at your new job? Jack thought about it. It's hard, really hard, and some days I want to quit. But yeah, I'm happy, because I'm building something that helps people. That matters more than whether it's easy. Good, Marcus said, going back to his homework. Because Mom says you're changing the world and I want to see that. Jack caught Angela's eye across the kitchen. She smiled at him. That smile that said I believe in you without words. Jack wasn't drowning anymore. He was learning to swim. By month 7 Jack had found his rhythm. The backlog was 70% cleared. The maintenance division now had 18 employees across 2 shifts. The first cohort of foster care trainees was progressing well, with Brian, Katie and Marcus showing particular promise. But then everything fell apart in a single week. It started on Monday when Katie Rodriguez didn't show up for work. Jack called her cell phone. No answer. He called the emergency contact number she'd listed. A social worker picked up. Katie was arrested Friday night, the woman said. Possession of stolen property. Her public defender thinks she might be looking at 6 months. Jack felt like he'd been punched. That doesn't make sense. Katie's been doing great. She wouldn't. Her ex-boyfriend showed up at her apartment. He'd stolen some electronics and needed a place to hide them. Katie let him in. Police raided the place that night. She's being charged as an accomplice. Jack drove to the county jail that afternoon. Spent 2 hours in a visiting room with Katie, who looked small and broken in her orange jumpsuit. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, she said, crying. I know I messed up. He said he'd changed. He said he needed help. I thought I was being kind. Kindness without boundaries is just enabling, Jack said quietly. But that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you made a mistake. I'm gonna lose the job, aren't I? The program. Jack thought about it. The smart move, the safe move, was to cut ties. Katie had violated program rules by getting arrested. Palmer Medical had a reputation to protect. But Jack kept thinking about Margaret's test. About giving people chances, about seeing human beings instead of liabilities. I'm going to talk to a lawyer, Jack said. We're going to figure this out. That night Jack sat at his kitchen table with Angela explaining the situation. What do you think I should do? He asked. Angela was quiet for a moment. What does your gut tell you? That Katie deserves a second chance. That one mistake shouldn't destroy her whole future. Then that's your answer. But Linda's gonna push back. The board might too. They're gonna say it's a liability, a risk. Then you fight for her. You show them the data. You make the case. You do what you know is right. Angela squeezed his hand. That's why they hired you, baby. Not to make easy decisions, but to make right decisions. Jack spent the next day gathering evidence. Katie's performance reviews. Her perfect attendance record. Testimonials from patients whose equipment she'd fixed. He hired a lawyer to review her case, who confirmed the charges would likely be dropped. Wednesday he presented everything to Linda. I want to keep Katie in the program, Jack said. Suspended without pay until the legal situation resolves, but not terminated. Linda frowned. Jack, the optics on this. I know, but the facts are clear. Katie let someone into her apartment. She didn't know he had stolen property. She's been cooperative with police. Her public defender says the DA is already considering dropping charges. And if they don't drop them, then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I'm not going to punish someone for a charge that hasn't been proven. That's exactly the kind of prejudgment these kids have faced their whole lives. Linda studied him. You know the board's going to have questions. Let them ask. I'll answer. That was Monday and Wednesday. On Thursday the Atlanta facility, which was supposed to open in 3 months, lost its building lease when the property owner discovered they'd be hiring criminals and foster kids. The man's exact words, according to the real estate agent. On Friday morning a local news station ran a story titled "Billion-Dollar Company Hires Felons to Fix Medical Equipment." The piece heavily implied that Palmer Medical was putting patients at risk by employing people with criminal records in their training program. By Friday afternoon, Linda called an emergency meeting. The board is concerned, she said carefully, not about the mission of the program, but about the optics, about liability. 3 board members want to suspend the foster care initiative until we can do more risk assessment. Jack felt rage building in his chest. Risk assessment. These kids are the lowest risk employees I have. They show up early, they work hard, they care about doing things right because they know what it's like to be judged and dismissed. I agree with you, Linda said. But I'm not the whole board. You need to make the case to them. Board meeting is Monday morning. Jack spent the weekend preparing. Angela helped him organize his data, craft his arguments, anticipate objections. Marcus watched his father work with quiet admiration. You're gonna win, Dad, the boy said Saturday night. I don't know, buddy. These are powerful people, but you're right. And Mom always says being right matters more than being powerful. Jack smiled. Your mom's a smart woman. Monday morning, Jack walked into the boardroom with a 3-inch binder of documentation and Angela's voice in his head. Be confident. You know your stuff. Don't let them intimidate you. The board members looked skeptical. One of them, a silver-haired man named Gregory Walsh, spoke first. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your passion for this program, but we have shareholders to answer to. Patients whose safety depends on our equipment. The risk of employing individuals with criminal backgrounds or unstable housing situations is simply too high. With respect, sir, that's not what the data shows, Jack said, opening his binder. Our foster care trainees have a defect rate of 0.3%. Our regular hires have a defect rate of 0.7%. The trainees are producing higher quality work. One data point doesn't. It's not one data point. Jack spread papers across the table. Attendance, performance reviews, customer satisfaction scores. On every metric that matters, these kids are outperforming expectations, not meeting them, beating them. Another board member spoke up. What about the young woman who was arrested? That's exactly the kind of incident we're trying to avoid. Katie Rodriguez was arrested because her ex-boyfriend hid stolen property in her apartment without her knowledge. She's being represented by a public defender who's confident the charges will be dismissed within 2 weeks. She made a mistake in judgment letting him into her home, but she didn't commit a crime. And if the charges aren't dismissed, Jack took a breath. Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I'm not going to punish someone for a charge that hasn't been proven. That's exactly the kind of prejudgment these kids have faced their whole lives. Gregory Walsh leaned forward. Mr. Bennett, I understand you have personal convictions about this, but business decisions can't be made on sentiment. They need to be made on risk analysis. You're right, Jack said. So let's analyze the real risks. The risk isn't that we hire foster kids who might make mistakes. The risk is that we don't hire them and lose access to some of the most motivated, hardest working people I've ever met. The risk is that we abandon a program that's already showing better results than our traditional hiring. The risk is that we become just another company that talks about social responsibility but doesn't actually do anything hard. The room was silent. Margaret Palmer, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. Gregory, you've been on this board for how long? 14 years. Then you remember why Robert and I started this company. It wasn't to maximize shareholder value. It was to give dignity to people everyone else had given up on. Veterans with disabilities who couldn't afford wheelchairs. Elderly people who couldn't afford mobility scooters. If we abandon that mission now because we're afraid of bad press, then we've lost what made us worth building in the first place. Gregory looked uncomfortable. Margaret, with respect, times have changed. The regulatory environment is different. The liability exposure is I don't care about liability exposure, Margaret said flatly. I care about doing what's right. Jack's program is working. The data proves it. The only question is whether we have the courage to stand behind it when things get complicated. The vote was close, 9-8 in favor of continuing the program with additional oversight and quarterly reviews. Jack felt exhausted and relieved. He called Angela from the parking lot. We won, barely, but we won. I knew you would. I'm proud of you, baby. Couldn't have done it without you. You helped me prepare all weekend. That's what partners do. Now get back to work. You've got trainees who need you. 2 weeks later, Katie's charges were dismissed. She returned to work with tears in her eyes and a determination Jack had never seen before.
He gathered the whole team, trainees and regular employees, and addressed them directly. "I want to talk about what happened with Katie," he said. "She made a mistake, she used poor judgment, but she didn't commit a crime, and she doesn't deserve to lose everything because of one bad decision." He paused. "Here's what I believe: people are more than their worst moments. Everyone in this room has screwed up at some point. The difference is, most of you got second chances. Katie, Brian, Marcus, Lisa, Devin, they haven't gotten those chances. Society wrote them off before they turned 20. So here's the deal: if you work for me, you get held to the same standards as everyone else. Same performance expectations, same quality requirements, same professionalism. But you also get the same second chances, the same benefit of the doubt, the same respect, no exceptions." Katie was crying quietly. Marcus Williams put his hand on her shoulder. "Now get back to work," Jack said. "We've got patients waiting for equipment." That night, Margaret called him. "You handled that well," Margaret said. "The board, the team, Katie. Robert would have been proud. I almost lost the whole program. But you didn't. You fought for it. You made the case with data instead of just emotion. You're learning, Jack, not just the business stuff, the leadership stuff." Jack thought about that. 3 months ago he would have just gotten angry at the board, would have made it about principles versus money. But Linda and Angela had taught him that you can have principles and be strategic, that caring about people and making good business arguments aren't opposites. "I'm still figuring it out," Jack admitted. "We all are, that's the job." After hanging up, Jack sat with Angela and Marcus on the couch, Marcus between them watching a movie, Angela's hand in his. "Thank you," Jack said quietly to his wife. "For what?" "For keeping me sane, for helping me think clearly, for believing in me when I don't believe in myself." Angela kissed his temple. "That's my job, and I'm never gonna stop doing it." 2 months later, the second cohort of foster care trainees arrived, 8 young people, including a 17-year-old named Rachel who'd aged out of the system just weeks before. Like the first cohort, they came wounded and uncertain. But this time, Jack had help. 13 months into the job, something shifted. Jack stopped feeling like an imposter, and started feeling like a director. The budget forecasts started making sense. The vendor negotiations got easier. The personnel decisions felt less terrifying. But the real change came from an unexpected source: Brian Chen. Brian had been the most challenging of the first cohort. At 23 he'd been bounced through 16 foster homes, never staying anywhere long enough to feel stable. He had trust issues, authority issues, and a chip on his shoulder the size of Pennsylvania. But he was brilliant with mechanical systems, could diagnose problems other technicians missed, could fix equipment that seemed beyond repair. One afternoon, Jack found Brian in the warehouse after hours, working on a complex wheelchair that had been sitting in the backlog for 8 months. 3 different mechanics had already tried and failed to fix it. "What are you still doing here?" Jack asked. "This chair belongs to a 12-year-old kid with muscular dystrophy," Brian said, not looking up from his work. "His mom called today, said he can't go back to school without it. I told her we'd have it ready by tomorrow." "Brian, that chair has been flagged as unrepairable. We were going to recommend a replacement." "It's not unrepairable. Everyone else just gave up too soon." Brian pointed to the motor assembly. "See this? The control board is fried." "Yeah, but the problem isn't the board, it's the power supply sending irregular voltage. If I replace the power supply and recalibrate the board, it'll work fine." Jack watched Brian work for the next 2 hours. The kid was meticulous, methodical, refusing to quit until he'd solved the problem. At 11:30 at night, the wheelchair hummed to life, running smoothly. "How'd you figure that out?" Jack asked. Brian shrugged. "I don't give up on things just because they're hard. Nobody ever gave up on me until I gave them a reason to. I don't give equipment that courtesy either." Something about that statement hit Jack hard. He'd been thinking about the trainees as people he was helping, people he was giving chances to. But Brian had just taught him something about persistence that he'd never quite articulated. That night, Jack told Angela about it. "This kid who I thought needed my help just taught me something I didn't know," Jack said. "How does that work?" Angela smiled. "That's how real teaching works, baby. It goes both ways. You're learning from him just like he's learning from you." The next week, Jack started asking Brian to help train the second cohort. Brian was rough around the edges as a teacher, blunt, impatient with excuses, demanding. But the new trainees responded to him in ways they didn't respond to Jack or the other mechanics. "He gets it," Rachel told Jack one day. "He knows what it's like." By month 15, Brian had become Jack's unofficial assistant director for training. He developed a whole curriculum around troubleshooting complex problems, created a mentorship system where each new trainee was paired with someone from the previous cohort, and he challenged Jack constantly. "Why are we still using this vendor?" Brian asked one day, pointing to a parts supplier. "Their quality is inconsistent, and their prices are 15% higher than market rate. "Because we're locked into a contract I signed when I first started," Jack admitted. "I didn't read the fine print. So break the contract. There's a penalty clause, $50,000. But if we switch vendors, how much would we save over the next year?" Jack did the math. "About $80,000. Then pay the penalty and save $30,000. That's basic math." Jack stared at him. "When did you become a business strategist?" "When I started paying attention to how you think through problems. You taught me that fixing equipment isn't just about the technical stuff. It's about understanding systems. Business is just another system." Jack brought the vendor switch proposal to Linda, expecting her to shoot it down. Instead she laughed. "Brian's right. I should have caught that contract issue months ago. Make the switch." The relationship between Jack and Brian became something neither of them had expected: mutual mentorship. Jack taught Brian about leadership, patience, and navigating corporate politics. Brian taught Jack about creative problem solving, questioning assumptions, and not being afraid to challenge the status quo. Angela noticed the change in Jack. "You seem lighter lately," she said one evening. "I think I'm finally getting the hang of this job, and Brian's helping me see things I was missing." "That's good, real good. Means you're building something sustainable, not just dependent on you." When the Atlanta facility finally opened at a different location, with a lease that explicitly welcomed the foster care program, Jack made Brian the assistant manager. The kid was 24 years old and had been in the program for barely 16 months. The board questioned it. Jack didn't care. "Brian is ready," he told them. "And even if he wasn't, I'd rather give a chance to someone who might fail than play it safe with someone who'll just be mediocre." Brian didn't fail. Within 3 months the Atlanta facility was outperforming Pittsburgh on quality metrics. One evening Brian called Jack from Atlanta. "Hey boss, wanted to tell you something." "What's up?" "I got my GED last week, and I enrolled at community college, gonna study engineering." Jack felt his throat tighten. "Brian, that's incredible." "Yeah, well, you told me once that where I started doesn't determine where I finish. Figured I'd test that theory." Brian paused. "None of this happens without you taking a chance on me. You know that, right? I just gave you an opportunity. You did all the hard work." "Nah man, you did more than that. You saw something in me I didn't see in myself. That's the real gift, not the job. The belief that I could do the job." After they hung up, Jack sat with Angela and Marcus at the dinner table. He told them about Brian's news. "See," Marcus said, "you are changing the world." Jack pulled his son close. "We're changing it together, buddy. Me, your mom, Mrs. Palmer, Brian, all of us. That's how change happens." Angela smiled at her husband across the table, pride shining in her eyes. That night Jack texted Margaret, "Thank you for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself." The response came immediately, "That's what Robert did for me. I'm just paying it forward. Now you're doing the same with Brian and the others." The cycle continues. Jack sat on the couch with Angela, her head on his shoulder. "I love you," he said. "I love you too, and I'm so proud of who you're becoming. I couldn't do any of this without you." "I know," she said with a smile. "That's why we're a team." 2 years and 3 months after fixing the scooter, Jack got the call he'd been dreading. Margaret Palmer was in the hospital. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, weeks maybe days left. Jack drove to Pittsburgh Medical Center that afternoon with Angela. They found Margaret in a private room, looking small and frail in the hospital bed. The powerful woman who'd changed Jack's life had withered to almost nothing. "You look terrible," Margaret said, her voice weak, but still carrying that wry humor. "You don't look so great yourself," Jack replied. pulling chairs next to the bed for him and Angela. Dying will do that to you. Margaret coughed, wincing. Hurts like hell to be honest, but I'm not here to complain. I'm here because I need to tell you some things before I run out of time. Margaret, you should rest. I'll rest when I'm dead, which is soon. So hush and listen. Margaret smiled to soften the words. She looked at Angela. I'm glad you're here too, dear. You need to hear this. Angela took Margaret's hand gently. The company is going to be fine, Margaret continued. Linda will be CEO. Richard will stay on as chief engineer. The board is solid. You don't need to worry about the business. I wasn't. Yes, you were. I can see it in your face. You're worried that without me everything falls apart. It won't. We built systems, not dependencies. That's the whole point. Margaret shifted in the bed, clearly in pain. But I do need to tell you about Robert, about what I learned from losing him. Jack and Angela waited. When Robert had his heart attack, it was sudden. 1 minute he was fixing the porch railing at our house, the same railing you fixed, Jack, and the next minute he was on the ground, gone before the ambulance arrived. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I never got to say goodbye, never got to tell him all the things I should have said every day, but didn't. Margaret, Angela said softly, let me finish. After Robert died, I was angry for so long, angry at him for leaving me, angry at myself for all the time we wasted on work instead of just being together. We built this company together, and somewhere along the way the building became more important than the us. She looked at Jack and Angela directly. Don't make my mistake. Don't let the work become everything. Don't sacrifice your marriage, your family, your time together on the altar of success. Jack squeezed Angela's hand. You two have something special, Margaret continued. I see the way you support each other, the way Angela keeps you grounded, Jack, the way you listen to her wisdom, the way you parent Marcus together. Don't lose that. Don't let this job, no matter how important it is, come before your family. We won't, Angela promised. Good. Margaret coughed again, harder this time. A nurse came in, checked her vitals, adjusted her medication. When she left, Margaret continued. I'm going to tell you something I never told anyone except Robert. The reason I started testing repair shops, the reason I went out disguised as a helpless old woman, it wasn't just about finding someone for the maintenance division. Jack leaned forward. It was about me, about my own guilt. Margaret's voice got quiet. A few months before Robert died, my scooter, a different one I had then, broke down while I was out. Robert was in his workshop, building something for the company. I called him, but he was too busy to come get me right away. So I tried to get home on my own, pushing that broken scooter in the heat. I had a bad fall, hurt my hip. Robert rushed to help me, felt terrible about it. The stress of seeing me hurt, feeling guilty, the doctor said it might have contributed to his heart attack a few weeks later. Margaret, that's not. Jack started. I know logically, but emotions don't care about logic. So when Robert died, I kept thinking, if I'd just waited for him, if he hadn't been so stressed, if I'd taken better care of my equipment. She looked at her hands. So I started testing shops, looking for someone who'd care about an old woman's scooter the way Robert had cared about me, looking for someone who'd do it right, not because there was money in it, but because it mattered. I was looking for redemption, Jack, and I found it in you. Angela was crying quietly. Jack felt tears on his face. You're not responsible for Robert's death, Angela said gently. I know that now, but I wanted you both to understand I didn't give Jack a job because he was qualified. I gave him a job because he reminded me of who Robert was, someone who cared about people more than profits, someone who saw equipment as a means of helping people, not just making money. Margaret gripped Jack's hand weakly. Don't let success change you. Don't let the money and the title and the power make you forget why you're doing this. Keep your family close. Keep Angela and Marcus at the center of your life. That's what Robert and I should have done better. They sat with Margaret for another hour, mostly in silence, just being present. When visiting hours ended, they said their goodbyes. Thank you, Margaret, Jack said, for everything. Thank you, Jack, for showing me that the test worked, that people like you still exist. And thank you, Angela, for keeping this man grounded. You're the secret to his success. Angela kissed Margaret's forehead. You rest now, we'll be back tomorrow. Maybe not, but I'm ready either way.
4 days later, Margaret Palmer died peacefully in her sleep, holding a photograph of Robert. Her funeral was held on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Over 2,000 people attended: employees, board members, patients, veterans, community leaders. The line of people waiting to pay respects stretched around the block. Jack sat in the front row with Angela, Marcus, Linda, Richard, and the other senior executives. He gave a eulogy that he'd written and rewritten a dozen times. Margaret Palmer once told me that she built her company on one simple rule: every person deserves respect. Not just the rich people, not just the educated people. Everyone. That rule guided everything she did. Jack looked out at the crowd. But what Margaret didn't realize, or maybe she did and was too humble to say it, is that she didn't just give people respect. She gave them chances. She gave them belief. She gave them the gift of being seen as more than their current circumstances. 2 years ago, I was a mechanic who'd just been fired for doing the right thing. Margaret didn't see a failed employee. She saw potential. She gave me a chance that changed my life, and then she taught me to do the same for others. She also taught me, in her final days, about what really matters. Not the business, not the success, but the people we love, the time we spend together, the relationships we nurture. Margaret's deepest regret was not spending enough time with Robert. Let that be a lesson to all of us. The greatest companies aren't built on products or profits, they're built on the belief that people matter more than money. Margaret built that kind of company, and her legacy isn't the billions of dollars or the equipment in thousands of hospitals. It's the people she believed in when nobody else would. Rest easy, Margaret. You earned it, and we'll carry forward what you started. After the funeral, Margaret's lawyer pulled Jack aside. Mrs. Palmer's will includes a bequest for you. Can you come to the office tomorrow? The next day, Jack and Angela sat in a conference room as the lawyer opened a sealed envelope. Mrs. Palmer wanted you to have this, the lawyer said, handing Jack a letter and a set of keys. The letter was handwritten in Margaret's shaky script. Dear Jack and Angela, if you're reading this, I'm dead, hopefully painlessly, but knowing my luck, probably not. I'm leaving you the garage where Robert and I started Palmer Medical. The building, the tools, everything. It's yours now. I'm not leaving it to you as a museum or a shrine. I'm leaving it to you as a workshop, a place where you can keep building what we started, where you can keep giving chances to people who need them. Use it however you think best. Turn it into a training center, a community workshop, a place where foster kids learn trades. Whatever serves the mission. Just promise me one thing: keep it human, keep it about people, not systems. Keep it about respect, not efficiency. Keep it about giving someone their dignity back, one repair at a time. Jack, you've already exceeded every hope I had for you. Now exceed your own. And Angela, thank you for being Jack's strength. This man couldn't do any of this without you. You're the foundation he builds on. Never forget your importance. With gratitude and respect, Margaret P. There's something else in the garage. Robert's original workbench, the one he built our first wheelchairs on. I want you to have it. Not to put behind glass, but to use, to teach Marcus on, to pass down through your family. It's not about the equipment. It's never been about the equipment. It's about love taking the shape of service. Jack and Angela drove to the garage that afternoon, Marcus in the back seat. It was a small building in an old industrial neighborhood, paint peeling, windows dusty, but when Jack unlocked the door and stepped inside, he felt like he was stepping into sacred space. The original workbench, the hand tools Margaret and Robert had used, photographs on the walls showing them as young people full of hope and determination, and in the corner, carefully preserved, Robert's leather work apron. Marcus ran to the workbench, running his hands over the worn wood. This is where they started. This is where they started, Jack confirmed. Angela wrapped her arms around Jack from behind. What are you thinking? That we need to honor this. Build something that would make Margaret and Robert proud. What did you have in mind? Jack looked around the space, ideas forming. A training center, the flagship location for the foster care program. Bring in kids from all over the state, give them intensive training, help them build careers, and we keep this workbench right here, so every kid who comes through learns the story of how two people with nothing but a garage and a dream built something that mattered. I love that, Angela said. Me too, Marcus added. Can I help build it? Jack pulled his son close. You're gonna do more than help build it, buddy. Someday you might run it. Over the next 8 months, Jack transformed the garage with Angela and Marcus by his side on weekends. He kept the original workbench and tools as a museum section, but he added modern equipment, classroom space, residential housing for trainees who needed it. He hired Brian to run the program, brought in Katie as lead instructor, made Marcus Williams the director of student services. Angela helped design the living spaces, making sure they felt like home rather than an institution. Marcus helped paint, organize and set up the classroom. It became a family project, a way to honor Margaret while building something new together. The Margaret and Robert Palmer Training Center opened on what would have been their 45th wedding anniversary. 52 young people attended the first intensive program. They came from foster care, from homelessness, from poverty, from incarceration. They came broken and uncertain and afraid, and they left with skills, dignity and belief that they mattered. At the opening ceremony, Jack stood at Robert's original workbench with Angela beside him and Marcus in the front row. He didn't give a long speech, he just showed them the workbench and told them the story. About two people who started with nothing but a garage and a dream. About a love that turned into service. About equipment that wasn't just metal and wires, but freedom and connection and life. That's what you're learning here, Jack said. Not just how to fix wheelchairs, how to give people their lives back, how to turn compassion into action, how to be the person someone needs when they're desperate and afraid and out of options. One trainee, a 19-year-old woman named Rachel, raised her hand. Mr. Bennett, why are you doing all this? The training program, this center, giving people like us chances. You could have just taken the job and made your money. Why go to all this effort? Jack looked at Angela, who smiled at him encouragingly. He looked at Marcus, who watched him with pride. Because 2 years ago an old woman came into a shop with a broken scooter. I had a choice, do the easy thing or do the right thing. I chose right, and it changed my life completely. But I didn't do it alone. My wife supported me through every hard moment. My son inspired me to be better. And Margaret Palmer believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He paused. Now I'm trying to create those moments for other people. Moments where someone sees you not as a problem or a risk but as a person with potential. And I'm trying to teach my son that the best way to live is to serve others. Rachel nodded slowly. And what if we fail? Then you fail, and you learn from it, and you try again. That's how all of us got here. Not by being perfect but by being persistent, and by having people who believed in us even when we stumbled. Jack put his arm around Angela's waist. Success isn't about doing it alone. It's about building a life with people who support you, who challenge you, who keep you honest. That's what I have with my wife. That's what I hope you all find. The program thrived. Over the next 5 years following Margaret's death, the training center became a national model. It trained over 300 young people from across Pennsylvania and neighboring states. The numbers told part of the story: a 92% completion rate, an 87% job placement rate within 6 months of graduation. But numbers couldn't capture the real impact. Not all of them succeeded. Some dropped out, some relapsed into old patterns, some just couldn't make it work. But the ones who did succeed built extraordinary lives. Brian got his engineering degree and eventually became VP of Operations for the entire Equipment Services division. Katie opened her own repair shop in Phoenix, specifically serving low-income communities. Marcus Williams became a national advocate for foster care reform. And Rachel, the young woman who'd asked why Jack did all this, she eventually took his job when he retired. Through it all, Angela was there, supporting Jack through late nights and hard decisions, celebrating victories, mourning losses, keeping their family grounded even as Jack's career soared. And Marcus grew up watching his parents build something that mattered, learning that success wasn't about money or titles but about service and integrity and love. Jack Bennett was 67 years old when he finally retired for good. He'd spent 22 years building Palmer Medical's Equipment Services division, starting at age 45 as a fired mechanic with no business experience, ending as a respected industry leader who transformed how medical equipment maintenance was done across the country. The division now operated in 15 states, employed over 800 people, and had trained more than 3,000 young people through the foster care program. But the numbers didn't capture what mattered.
What mattered was the 10-year-old girl in Boston who could go to school because Brian's team fixed her wheelchair overnight. The elderly veteran in Miami, whose scooter Katie repaired for free on one of their monthly service days. The young man in Seattle who found purpose and stability after Marcus Williams hired him despite a criminal record. What mattered was the ripple effect of one simple choice, spreading outward in ways Jack could never have imagined. On his last day, Jack stood in the Margaret and Robert Palmer Training Center watching a new cohort of trainees learn to disassemble wheelchairs. Rachel stood beside him. Angela sat on a nearby bench watching her husband with pride. Marcus, now 27 and working as a social worker, had taken the day off to be there. "You built something incredible here," Rachel said. "We built it, all of us. I just started the conversation. You did more than that. You showed us that broken things, broken equipment, broken systems, broken lives can be fixed if someone cares enough to try." Jack smiled. "That's what Margaret taught me, and what I tried to teach you. You succeeded. This program has changed thousands of lives. Not the program. The people. Programs are just structures. People are what matter." They stood in silence watching the trainees work. One of them, a 20-year-old named David who'd been homeless 6 months ago, was carefully repairing a pediatric wheelchair, his face intense with concentration. "You think he'll make it?" Rachel asked. "I think he's got a shot. That's all any of us get. A shot. What we do with it is up to us." Jack's phone buzzed. A message from the hospital where he volunteered 1 day a week, fixing equipment for patients who couldn't afford repairs. "Mr. Bennett, we have a mobility scooter that needs work. Owner is elderly, vision impaired, can't afford the quoted repair cost. Can you help?" Jack looked at Angela. "Want to come with me? One last repair before I officially retire." "Absolutely." Angela stood and took his hand. Marcus joined them. "I'm coming too. You started teaching me to fix things when I was 11. Might as well finish the lesson." They drove to the hospital together, found the elderly woman sitting in the lobby with her broken scooter, looking small and frightened and defeated. Jack knelt beside the scooter, examined the problem. Loose drive belt, worn pulley, same issue as Margaret's scooter had been 22 years ago. "How much will it cost?" the woman asked, her voice shaking. "Nothing," Jack said. "It's covered." "By what?" "By someone who taught me that fixing equipment is about more than just the equipment. It's about giving people their dignity back, their independence, their connection to life." Rachel had followed them to watch. She smiled, recognizing the echo of Margaret's philosophy. They fixed the scooter together. Jack, Angela, Marcus and Rachel, 3 generations united in service. Took them 45 minutes. When they were done, the elderly woman cried and thanked them and asked why they'd help her. "Because someone helped me once," Jack said, "and she taught me that kindness isn't just what you do. It's who you are. It's what you leave behind when you're gone." Marcus added, "And because my dad taught me that the best way to honor the people who helped us is to help others." That night Jack drove past the old location where Peterson's auto shop used to be. The building was gone now, replaced by a parking lot. Gary Peterson had died 3 years ago, alone, bitter, forgotten. Jack didn't feel triumph at that, just sadness. 2 men had started from similar places, with similar skills. One had chosen greed, one had chosen service, and those choices had created completely different legacies. He drove home thinking about Margaret and Robert, about his grandfather, about every person who taught him that the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away. At home, Angela was making tea in their kitchen. A nicer kitchen now, in a nicer house, but still modest, still them. "Good last day?" she asked. "Perfect last day." Jack wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For believing in me when I got that job offer. For supporting me through every hard moment. For keeping me grounded. For being my partner in all of this." Angela turned in his arms. "That's what love is, baby. We're a team. Always have been. Always will be." They stood together in their kitchen, holding each other, grateful for the journey they'd taken together. The next morning, Jack got a call from Rachel. "Jack, that woman we helped yesterday, she posted about it on social media. It's already been shared 800 times. People are asking how they can support the work we do." Jack smiled. "The ripples keep spreading. They really do. Hey, I was thinking, what if we expanded the training center? opened satellite locations in other cities, trained even more young people. I'm retired, Rachel, that's your decision now, but I still need your advice. No, you don't. You've got everything you need. Trust yourself, trust the mission, trust that doing right by people is always the best strategy, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, that's when it matters most. After they hung up, Jack sat on his porch with Angela and Marcus, who'd stopped by for Sunday breakfast. They watched the sun rise over Riverside, drinking coffee together in comfortable silence. Jack thought about a scooter and a choice and a life that had unfolded in ways he could never have predicted. He thought about Margaret's final words, "You've already exceeded every hope I had for you, now exceed your own." Jack smiled. He'd spent 22 years trying to do exactly that, trying to build something that mattered, trying to give people the chances he'd been given. And the work would continue long after he was gone. That was the point of legacy. Not to build monuments to yourself, but to plant seeds that would grow into forests you'd never see. Somewhere in Philadelphia, a young man named David was learning to repair wheelchairs, learning that his past didn't define his future, learning that someone believed in him. Somewhere in Boston, a little girl was going to school in a wheelchair Brian's team had fixed overnight. Somewhere in Miami, an elderly veteran was visiting his wife's grave on a scooter Katie had repaired for free. The ripples kept spreading, and 22 years after Jack Bennett had made a simple choice to fix an old woman's scooter, those ripples were still changing lives, one repair at a time. Marcus leaned against his father's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Dad. I'm proud of you too, son. And proud of your mother. Couldn't have done any of this without you both." Angela squeezed Jack's hand. "We know, and we're proud of us too. All three of us. We did this together." They sat together as a family, watching the morning unfold, knowing that the best parts of their legacy weren't the buildings or the programs or the numbers. The best parts were the love they'd shared, the values they'd passed down, and the countless lives they'd touched by simply choosing again and again to do the right thing. The woman standing outside the Riverside Heritage Center was 40 years old, confident in her business suit, looking at the building with memories and purpose. Her name was Rachel Martinez. 20 years ago she'd been the 19-year-old foster kid who'd asked Jack Bennett why he bothered helping people like her. Today she was Chief Operating Officer of Palmer Medical's entire Equipment Services division, running 12 regional centers, over 500 employees, and a training program that had graduated more than 3,000 young people from foster care. She was here to pay forward what Jack had given her. Inside the Heritage Center, a new group of trainees sat nervously, waiting for orientation. 28 young people, all from foster care, all wondering if this chance was real or just another letdown in a long line of letdowns. Rachel smiled, remembering that feeling. She walked to the front of the room, past the preserved mobility scooter that had started everything, past photos of Margaret and Robert Palmer, past Jack and Angela Bennett, receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom for changing business practices, past the wall of plaques, honoring every graduate of the training program. "I want to tell you a story," she began, "about a mechanic named Jack Bennett, an old woman with a broken scooter, and the most important choice anyone ever made." As she spoke, as she watched understanding grow on those young faces, Rachel knew the ripples were still spreading, still touching lives, still changing the world, one act of kindness at a time. Outside, a man in his mid-60s sat in his truck with a woman beside him, watching through the window. Jack Bennett had retired 7 years ago, giving leadership to Rachel and her generation. But he still came to the training center regularly, still helped new technicians, still believed his most important work was helping others find their potential. Angela sat beside him, her hand in his, her presence as essential now, as it had been that first day he'd come home fired and uncertain. They watched Rachel speak, watched the trainees lean forward with hope and hunger, watched the cycle repeat itself once more. "You did good, baby," Angela said softly. "We did good," Jack corrected. "None of this happens without you." "I know," she said with a smile. "Just wanted to hear you say it." Jack laughed and kissed his wife's hand. They sat together, partners still, watching the future unfold. Jack thought about his grandfather, about Margaret and Robert, about every person who taught him that kindness wasn't weakness but the strongest foundation you could build on. Small acts, big consequences, ripples that never stopped spreading. That was the legacy. That was the mission. That was the work that would continue long after everyone who'd started it was gone. Jack smiled, started his truck and drove away with Angela beside him, knowing the future was in good hands. The ripples would keep spreading, always.